Hello friends. Today I'm going to tell you about a very interesting, mystical thriller. Part 1. The letter arrived on a wet Tuesday, sealed with a crimson wax stamp he didn't recognize. It was from a solicitor's office in upstate Vermont. The message was simple. Mr. Alan Merrow. We regret to inform you of the passing of your great-uncle, Silas Wren. As his last surviving heir, you are entitled to his estate, located in the town of Graybriar. Instructions are enclosed for transfer of ownership. The property is yours, should you choose to accept it. P.S. The house must not be left unoccupied overnight. Ever. Alan had never heard of Silas Wren. Or Graybriar. Yet something inside him stirred. An itch beneath the skin. A low hum at the base of his spine. His life in Boston had grown increasingly gray, the job, the relationships, the endless clatter of the city. The offer of something different, somewhere quiet, felt oddly right. He didn't question the warning. Not then. 2 weeks later, Alan stood in front of the estate, a 3-story Victorian house perched on a rise above the town, shrouded in mist and ivy. Locals called it Widdershins House. Its windows looked like closed eyes, hiding something too old to forget. As he turned the iron key in the lock, the heavy wooden door swung open on its own. The air inside smelled of cedar, rust, and damp secrets. The first night was uneventful. Silent. Too silent. But on the second night, things changed. Alan awoke around 2:14 a.m., heart pounding, as if from a nightmare he couldn't remember. The house was unnaturally cold, and in the hallway, every picture frame was tilted exactly 15 degrees to the left. In the bathroom, the mirror was fogged despite the cold. Words had been written in the condensation. You were never meant to return. His breath caught in his throat. There was no one else in the house. He told himself it was a prank. Old pipes. Bad humidity. Maybe he'd sleepwalked. In the morning, a knock came at the door. A woman stood there, pale and shaking, with wild, frightened eyes. Leave, she whispered. You look just like him. Like Silas did before the end. Before Alan could speak, she backed away, stumbled down the steps, and disappeared into the trees. He never saw her again. That evening, as he explored the study, Alan found a strange leather-bound book behind a row of hollowed-out encyclopedias. The pages were filled with cramped, spidery handwriting. A diary. The first entry read, I can hear the echoes again. Last night they whispered through the floorboards. They said my name. The mirrors are not safe anymore. They show more than reflections. They remember what happened here. SW. Suddenly, the telephone in the hallway rang. An old rotary phone. He hadn't even realized it was connected. Alan hesitated, then answered. A voice whispered on the line. It was dry, distant. Cracked like dead leaves. Alan? Is that you? You shouldn't have come back. Click. He stood there for a long time, the silence in the receiver still pressing against his ear. Then he looked up. In the darkened hallway mirror across from him. Something was standing behind him. Alan spun around. Nothing. Just empty hallway. But the mirror still held the afterimage, a pale figure, long-limbed and wrong in all the ways a human body shouldn't be. Its hands had nearly brushed his shoulders. He stepped back, heart hammering. The reflection flickered. For a brief moment, the hallway behind him in the mirror looked older. Decayed. Wallpaper peeling like dead skin. Then, reality snapped back into place. He stared at himself. At least, he thought it was himself. The reflection blinked a second too late. That night, he slept in short bursts, if it could be called sleep. He dreamed of a spiral staircase that descended forever, each step echoing like a scream. At the bottom, a locked door. Scratched. Gnawed from the inside. Something behind it whispered in a voice that sounded like his own. When he woke, the floor beneath his bed was wet. No leaks in the ceiling. Just cold, stagnant water soaking into the wooden planks. And on the wall above his headboard, written in black marker, one he did not own, were the words. Remember the dreams. He began exploring the house more deliberately. Behind a warped painting in the upstairs hall, he discovered a hidden staircase leading to a narrow attic. The door creaked open with the sound of splintering teeth. The attic was filled with moth-eaten furniture and a small child's rocking horse that began rocking on its own as he entered. Something skittered in the darkness, too fast to see. Alan turned his flashlight, and it died instantly. When the light came back, he was standing in front of a wall with dozens of handprints, bloody and child-sized. And below them, scratched into the paneling. We're still here, Silas. He stumbled back into the hallway, stomach turning. In the distance, the rotary phone began ringing again. He didn't want to answer it. But his feet moved anyway. He lifted the receiver. The static was louder this time. Then, from beneath the distortion. Alan, they think you're him. They think you're Silas. Who are they? They live in the walls. They want you to open the room again. Click. Later that day, Alan drove into Greybriar looking for answers. The town was oddly quiet, as if it had shrunk inward, waiting. At the grocery store, a clerk dropped a glass bottle when she saw him. Jesus, she whispered. You're not supposed to be here. Not again. He tried to ask her what she meant, but she backed away and said no more. At the sheriff's office, the desk was abandoned. An open logbook on the counter listed several missing persons over the last month, all dated after Alan arrived. That night, he avoided mirrors. He covered them with bedsheets. Turned them to face the walls. Still, at 2:14 a.m., he woke up. Something cold pressed against the other side of the wall behind his head. A low hum began vibrating the floorboards. A presence moving beneath the house, slow and heavy, dragging something behind it. And then, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the inside of his bedroom closet. He got up, hand trembling as he reached for the knob. Opened it. Only coats. Still air. A faint scent of earth and mildew. But scratched into the wooden back panel, barely visible. Don't trust yourself after midnight. He closed the door and turned. And saw himself standing at the end of the hall. Smiling. Alan froze. The figure at the end of the hallway was him. Same clothes. Same hair. Same tired eyes. But the smile, it was all wrong. Too wide. Too knowing. And it didn't blink. Who are you? Alan whispered, voice barely leaving his throat. The doppelgänger didn't respond. It slowly raised a hand and pointed toward the mirror Alan had covered earlier with a sheet. Then it turned and walked backward, into the dark wall. As if swallowed by the house itself. Alan yanked the sheet off the mirror. His reflection stared back. But his shirt was soaked in blood. He looked down. His shirt was clean. He looked back. The reflection smiled and mouthed. It's not your house anymore. Alan barely slept. When morning came, the mirror's reflection was normal again, except for a thin crack running right through his face in the glass. He decided to read more of Silas Wren's diary, hoping it would offer clarity. But it only deepened the dread. The mirror version of me walks freely now. I see it out the corner of my eye. It whispers truths I don't want to know. The door under the house is locked with 12 seals. But I hear them scratching from the other side. The house feeds on presence. It imitates. It replaces. I can't trust the man in the mirror anymore. Alan flipped further ahead. A page had been violently ripped out, only a ragged corner remained. Someone had written in the margin. The dreams are maps. Follow them. That afternoon, he went back into the attic. He brought a crowbar and began prying at the back wall where the handprints had been. Underneath the boards, he found a narrow, dust-choked passage, just big enough to crawl through. The air inside smelled like rot and old breath. He moved slowly, light flickering. At the end of the crawlspace, a trapdoor. It led downward. Too far downward for an attic. He opened it. A spiral staircase, identical to the one from his recurring dreams, curved downward into darkness. He descended. The walls grew damp. The air colder with every step. Eventually, he reached a small underground chamber lit by a single flickering bulb. In the center of the room stood a mirror, tall and old, its frame carved with symbols he didn't recognize. Its surface rippled, not like glass, but like water. As Alan approached, a bloody handprint appeared on the inside of the glass. Then another. And another. Dozens of hands, pressing from inside. Suddenly, his phone rang, despite no signal. He answered it. You opened the wrong door, Alan. Who is this? You are. The voice was distorted, but it was unmistakably his own. He looked up. And his reflection smiled. Then stepped out of the mirror. Alan stumbled back as the reflection slid out of the mirror, its movement smooth and silent, like water flowing uphill. It looked exactly like him, same stubble, same scar on the chin, but its eyes were empty. Polished. As if something ancient was staring out from behind human skin. The doppelgänger didn't speak. It only tilted its head slowly, curiously, like a predator amused by its prey. Alan turned to run, but the staircase was gone. The trapdoor above had vanished. In its place, solid, breathing wall. He was trapped in the mirror room. The other Alan took a step forward. Then another. And then it whispered, not aloud, but inside his head. You're the reflection now. The light flickered violently. The mirror pulsed like a heartbeat. Desperate, Alan lunged for the only object in the room that wasn't glass, the rusted bulb fixture overhead. He tore it free, sparks flying, and hurled it at the doppelgänger. It passed straight through. But the bulb shattered against the mirror. The glass cracked, then screamed. Not a sound, but 1,000 overlapping voices shrieking in agony. The doppelgänger reeled back, its face twitching, convulsing, eyes rolling white. Alan took his chance and ran straight into the mirror. He expected impact. Instead, he fell through. Into darkness. Cold and wet, like being born into a grave. When he opened his eyes, he was back in his bed. Was it a dream? He looked around. Everything seemed normal. Until he noticed the mirror across the room was missing. In its place, an empty frame, like a mouth pried open too wide. Then came the knock. Tap tap tap. From the inside of his closet. Again. This time, Alan opened it without hesitation. Inside was a small, wooden box. On its lid, burned in careful lettering. To him who crossed the threshold. He opened it. Inside, a roll of ancient film negatives, a brass key, and a child's tooth, still bloody. Downstairs, he noticed something was off. The painting in the hallway now showed a different scene. Before, it was just an oil landscape. Now, it showed a man, him, standing before the mirror, bleeding from the eyes, reaching toward something unseen. He turned away, and noticed his reflection wasn't following. In the hallway mirror, Alan kept walking. The real Alan had stopped. The reflection smiled, and reached out. From inside the glass. The rotary phone rang again. Alan answered. This time, no voice, only the sound of children crying. Dozens. Maybe more. Somewhere deep underground. Then a single voice, young, male. They're still trapped here. In the room that shouldn't exist. She keeps them. Behind the door you forgot. Who keeps them? Alan asked, throat dry. Mother of glass. The call cut off. And behind him, at the end of the hallway, a new door stood where none had before. Painted black. No handle. Carved into the wood, in sharp white chalk. Enter only if you've lost yourself. Alan stepped toward it. And it creaked open. The door swung open with a groan like a wounded animal. Inside was utter darkness, thick and heavy, like stepping into ink. The hallway behind Alan seemed to recede, as though the house itself was pulling him inward. He hesitated. Then the floor beneath him tilted, and he tumbled forward into the black. The door slammed shut behind him. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the house. He stood in a narrow corridor, carved entirely of black stone, walls etched with shifting symbols that moved when he wasn't looking directly at them. There was no sound, not even his own breathing. The only source of light came from a thin, pulsating vein running along the ceiling, glowing with a pale blue hue. Alan followed the corridor, step by reluctant step. Along the walls were windows, but not to the outside. Each one revealed a different moment from his life. His father dying in a hospital bed. His first kiss. The moment he'd signed the papers to inherit the house. But in each reflection, there was something off. A figure, always lurking in the background. Sometimes just a shadow. Sometimes clearer. Always watching. At the end of the corridor stood a mirror-framed door, its surface swirling like oil on water. As Alan approached, his reflection reached out first. It spoke before he did. She knows you're here now. You brought the key. She's waiting. The brass key, the one from the box, was suddenly warm in his pocket. He inserted it into the door. It turned with a sickening squelch, as if pushing into something soft. The door opened. He entered a circular chamber, lit by candles that dripped blood instead of wax. In the center was an ancient rocking cradle, gently swaying, though there was no wind. Beside it stood a figure cloaked in black lace, tall, skeletal, her face hidden by a veil woven of tiny shards of mirror. Her voice was both a whisper and a shriek, layered like hundreds of voices overlapping. You carry his blood. You wear his skin. But you are not Silas. Not yet. Alan stepped back. Who are you? I am the one he bargained with. The one he fed. For knowledge. For protection. For escape. She lifted a crimson-stained bundle from the cradle and unwrapped it slowly. Inside, a mirror shaped like an infant's face, its mouth screaming silently, eyes wide and weeping silver tears. Each generation must choose, become the house, or feed it. Behind him, the chamber walls began to weep black fluid, running in words Alan couldn't read. He broke the rules. So now the house wants more. It wants you. The cradle rocked harder. The candles flared. The floor beneath Alan cracked, and 1,000 hands reached upward, pale and tiny, dragging themselves from beneath the stone. He turned to run. But the mirror door was gone. Only a wall remained. And then, from every mirror back home, his doppelgänger began stepping through, one after another, filling the house, walking into the world. The room shook as the black fluid oozed faster down the stone, the words now shifting violently, almost screaming in written form. Alan backed away from the pale, reaching hands, dozens of them, tiny and cold, gripping at his legs and ankles with impossible strength. Let me out, he shouted to the veiled woman. But she was gone. Only the cradle remained, rocking violently now, its infant-faced mirror vibrating with a high-pitched whine, like metal screaming under pressure. Then a crack tore across the stone floor, and Alan fell through it. He landed hard, coughing on dust and dry air. He was inside the walls. The walls of his house. They stretched endlessly, twisting like intestines, filled with beams and rot and children. Figures shuffled in the darkness, small, barefoot, whispering, watching. He called out, but they didn't respond. Instead, they began to chant. Feed the house. Feed the house. Feed the house. The whispers grew louder, surrounding him, pressing into his mind until he clutched his head and screamed. Suddenly, a match flared to life just inches from his face. A little girl stood in front of him, eyes pale white, blood running from her ears. She held out something in her hands. A photograph, faded, torn. It showed Alan, standing outside the house. But dated 1952. He shook his head. That's not possible. The girl said softly, "You've been here before." Then she vanished into the darkness. Alan crawled for what felt like hours, until he found a grate leading back into the living room. He kicked it open and pulled himself out, gasping. The house was different now. All the furniture was gone. The wallpaper was curled, stained black. The windows boarded shut. The air smelled of wet soil and old meat. He checked the clock, 2:14 a.m. Of course. The rotary phone rang again. He answered it, trembling. A man's voice this time. Familiar. Dry. Almost broken. She took them all. The town. My friends. My wife. I thought the bargain would protect them. Alan whispered, "Silas?" Silence. Then. "You need to burn the cradle. Before it's too late." "How? Where?" But Silas's voice was already fading. "She sees through mirrors. Never break them. Never look too long. Wait, what happens if you see your reflection move first, run." Click. A sound from the hallway. A thud. Then another. Alan grabbed the nearest object, a broken lamp, and slowly stepped into the dark corridor. At the far end, a mirror was uncovered. Alan saw himself in it. He stopped. Watched. Waited. And then. His reflection blinked first. Not him. It grinned. And stepped out of the mirror again. But this time, it wasn't alone. One by one, other versions of him began emerging from every reflective surface, bathroom mirror, TV screen, even the puddle near the basement stairs. Alan turned to run, only to find that the walls were bleeding children's names, scrawled over and over in charcoal black letters. And just behind him, a voice, his voice, whispered. "You'll make a fine addition to the house." Alan didn't sleep that night. He sat on the living room floor, every mirror in the house now covered with bed sheets, towels, and anything he could find, even aluminum foil. But the reflection still whispered behind the fabric. He heard scratching. Breathing. And sometimes, his own voice, begging to be let out. At dawn, he fled the house. Greybriar was a ghost town. The grocery store stood open, lights flickering, but no one inside. Carts were overturned, the register still beeping for payment. A bottle of milk sat leaking on the floor, warm and curdled. The diner's front door was cracked. Food still steamed on half-eaten plates. A radio in the back played faint jazz. But no people. Not one. He drove to the police station, empty. School, silent. He knocked on doors, called into windows. Nothing. Only the wind answered. And the mirrors, in shop windows and rear-view mirrors, followed him as he moved. At the edge of town, he spotted a figure walking toward the woods. He ran after it. In a clearing, he found a small cemetery choked by weeds. He hadn't seen it on the map before. At the center stood a new grave, fresh earth mounded over it. No name. Just a mirror shard stuck into the soil. Alan reached down, and saw his reflection in the shard smiling, blood leaking from its eyes. Then behind him, a child's voice. "They're all in the house now." He turned. A young boy stood there, mud-covered, barefoot, holding a toy train missing a wheel. His skin was pale as wax. Alan whispered, "Who are you?" The boy shook his head. "We're not allowed to say our names. She takes them. Names are power." "Who is she?" "Mother of glass. She lives under the cradle. She feeds on the lost." "What happened to the town?" The boy's eyes glassed over. They all answered the phone. He looked up sharply. "And you did too." Suddenly, the boy burst into smoke, fine, gray ash drifting upward like something unmade. Alan staggered back to his car. It was gone. In its place was a mirror, the exact shape and size of his windshield, floating just above the ground. Inside it, he saw the town, burning. People running. Screaming. But they weren't outside. They were trapped in the glass. One of them turned to face him. A woman, eyes wide with terror. She slammed her palms against the inside of the mirror. It was the woman who had warned him to leave. Her mouth formed a single word before the mirror cracked and went dark. "Run." Alan sprinted back toward the house, heart in his throat. When he arrived, the front door was open. The cradle was no longer in the basement. It was in the center of the living room now, gently rocking. Inside it, a baby's blanket. It moved. Alan stepped forward, shaking, and peeled it back. Underneath was not a child, but a perfectly round mirror, the size of a baby's face. It blinked. And began to cry. The mirror in the cradle screamed. Not a baby's cry, but a high, crystalline wail, piercing and sharp, like a violin string stretched to the breaking point. The walls of the house vibrated with the sound. Floorboards buckled. Picture frames fell. Alan stumbled backward, hands over his ears, but the sound wasn't just physical, it was inside his skull, shattering something unseen. The reflective infant face twisted, distorting with 1,000 microscopic fractures, each crack forming a screaming mouth or a wide, weeping eye. Then it whispered. "Feed us." The house groaned in pleasure. Alan bolted for the front door. It no longer led outside. Through the frame, he saw only a hallway, one from the attic. He turned around. Behind him, more doors than the house had ever had before, each one slightly ajar, and from each, the same sound. A cradle rocking. He picked a direction and ran, weaving through hallways that shouldn't exist, turning corners where no corners had ever been. The architecture twisted behind him like a labyrinth alive. The house was shifting. Watching. Preparing. Eventually, he found himself in a room he didn't recognize, round, windowless, lit by a single flickering bulb hanging by a wire. In the center of the room, a man, kneeling, back to Alan. His head was shaved, scalp carved with strange, symmetrical runes. Alan approached slowly. The man turned his head, barely. Half his face was missing. The other half was Alan's. "You're late," he croaked. "You were supposed to be the final seal." "Seal for what?" Alan whispered. "For her. To come through fully. The others were only practice. Copies. Children." He coughed. Blood ran down his chin. "But you're real." "What do I do?" "Burn the mirror in the cradle." "I tried." It didn't break. The man smiled grimly. Because you haven't bled yet. Suddenly, the walls of the room peeled away, as if made of paper soaked in acid. Alan was no longer in the round chamber. He was in the basement again, but now it was filled with mirrors, stacked floor to ceiling, each one reflecting a different version of him. One with hollow eyes. One with broken limbs. One hanging from the ceiling. One whispering to himself while holding the brass key. In the center, the cradle rocked slowly. The infant mirror grinned. And then, a face began to push through it, stretching the surface like skin. Her. Mother of glass. Alan lunged forward. The mirror baby's eyes widened. He raised the key like a blade and jammed it downward. But the moment the tip pierced the surface, he screamed. Not the mirror, Alan. His blood sprayed onto the glass, and the cradle shuddered violently, the entire house rumbling in rage or ecstasy. Then the mirrors in the basement shattered all at once. For a second, everything was still. Then the walls cracked, and behind them, hundreds of tiny hands began reaching through the plaster. The children were coming out. And Alan. Alan was starting to forget his name. He dropped the key. It burned his fingers now. In the far mirror, the last one left intact, he saw not himself, but Silas Wren. Old. Mad smiling. Now you see. The house doesn't haunt you. It becomes you.